welcome. Thanks for being here. NKT students, this is my interview with Jackie. I'm excited to get started. Jackie is a friend of mine that I met about a year and a half ago when I first got started in NKT. She's been a great mentor and friend of mine, helping me learning NKT, and I instantly wanted to pick her as my first person to interview with this. She currently lives down in San Diego / kind of lives over in Taiwan sometimes. Owns a gym over in Taiwan called Live to Play. So when you have somebody who comes into your office and they maybe don't know anything about NKT, they're absolutely clueless, zero information. I'm curious, what are some of the things you might start off with them on?
First of all, I'll explain to them a little bit more about like a basic thing about how dysfunctions work neurologically, and then I'll explain like what NKT does and how that just kind of comes into play. So I'll just kind of explain to them. Yeah, so I'll kind of explain to them how as far as like motor control dysfunctions or just like so they just say muscle imbalances because that makes more sense to people. I'll tell them about muscle imbalances and how that there's going to be things compensating for other things, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." Yeah. And the issue is that we have at any given time we'll have a million things that'll be compensating for like another million things. We just don't know which ones are compensating for which. And so instead of just kind of doing like a spray and pray kind of approach, we use NKT, which helps us identify exactly which compensator is going with which compensatee, or which plus is going with which minus. And we'll do that through muscle testing, and then I'll show them about muscle testing. And I'll tell them that it's not going to be a competition of strength. It's more of a test to see whether or not this muscle or this body part is communicating properly with the brain. And so we're going to be looking for cross wires. And we're going to be doing this through the muscle testing. So it's going to be a very light pressure. And I'll practice with them on a different body part. So like if they're in for a knee issue, I'm not going to test them on the knee. I'm going to test them on like the shoulder where it's safe for them. So this way they have like a heads up of what the muscle test involves, how much pressure, this, all that sort of thing. So they feel comfortable with it.
Okay. Do you ever feel like there's advantages with certain people to actually giving the explanation versus some people where you'd say, oh, I'm not going to give the explanation, I'm just going to start testing? Is there any cases where you might do different things with that?
I've tried it both ways before. I mean, I used to do it where I would just start muscle testing people, and part of it was because I would forget. Forget, like, oh, I just kind of assume everybody knows what I'm doing. But what happens with that, with not explaining things to people first, is that they get very confused and lost. So they have no idea what's going on, and some people end up in a place of just feeling scared and weary. Because a lot of the stuff is already kind of woo-woo to them anyway. They're like, wait, how did you do this magic? And it already blows their mind. So I find that any preparation that I can give them, any mental preparation that I can give them will always help.
Okay.
So yeah, plus like, I mean, if you're doing muscle testing on somebody, and of course we have a different style of muscle testing than the traditional muscle testing, it just makes it a lot easier for me as a practitioner to kind of move things along instead of constantly telling them go lighter, go lighter, go lighter, go lighter, go lighter. Yeah. So eventually you have to explain to them anyway, like how light you want them to go and which direction and all that. So I find that just kind of getting all that out in the beginning helps a lot in the process.
Do you have any kind of like really initial questions that you would ask specifically for NKT?
I mean, like as detailed a history as possible, and I'll actually jog their memory by going through specific examples. So instead of saying, okay, is there anything in your past that I should know about, any injuries or surgeries or things, because that covers a broad spectrum of things, and a lot of things that people don't think as a surgery, for example, or an injury to the skin, they won't say it, and a lot of times they will forget it. For example, I had someone the other day who forgot that they had a tummy tuck.
Okay.
They didn't think that was a surgery, but they had like this, it was probably about 18-inch scar running across the belly.
Okay, wow.
So, I mean, that kind of had a little bit to do with their back pain.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Just tiny bit, yeah.
Tiny bit. So I'll actually run through specific examples like, okay, have you ever had any like cosmetic surgeries? Have you had wisdom teeth pulled out? Have you ever, twisted an ankle, jammed a pinky? broken, like, because they always think like broken bones. Or even if you say broken bones, they don't think like broken toes count as anything, so they won't say stuff like that. I'll ask for piercings and tattoos, hits to the head, even with soccer balls, and I'll just go like this sometimes and just kind of mimic it, because sometimes if you say hits to the head, they just, it doesn't come to their mind. But if you just kind of have like a visual something going to their head, it just adds a little bit more to jogging their memory.
Okay.
And so I try to be as thorough as possible, but quick. But also keeping in mind that they'll almost always forget something important later.
Always.
Yeah, always. I like to say almost always, just in case. But yeah, they'll always forget something important later on.
Yeah.
And I just, depending on who it is, I'll give them a hard time about it, just to kind of joke around with them. I'm like, you know what, that tummy tuck, I think that counts as a surgery from before.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, yeah.
I always give them a hard time.
But I'll also ask them for sure, like, what makes it better, what makes it worse. I think that's also a very important thing. And also, like, what positions, or like when it might hurt more, or when it might hurt less. So, for example, if like their back pain only comes up when they're, after they've been working for a while, like after they've been sitting for a while, then I know that sitting is going to be a big issue. So I'll actually test them in sitting, and just going to see what shuts down and whatnot. But also, like what makes it better, because if we know what makes it better, then that gives us a clue as far as to what the other part of the pair might be. So, what makes it better might inadvertently be like the other end of the dysfunction that they're just like inadvertently treating but not treating, so it just gives us more clues as far as like what the other part of the issue is. So those are just some of the things that I guess I would ask. I have this whole like a sheet of things, and I just kind of let it go by what the client is telling me. And then sometimes, like if it could be like specific sports and stuff too. So I'll ask them more specifically in that sport, like when it hurts in the sport. And if I don't understand the sport, then I'll ask them to show it to me. And so it just gives me a little bit more of a visual. And sometimes I might like reenact stuff with them. That's always fun.
Yeah, that's fun. What you said a second ago, a checklist. So do you actually have like a checkbox of everything that you're going to ask them and go through with them, or is it kind of like a mental checklist in your mind?
So it's more of a mental checklist. So like my intake form is kind of, or like my history intake form is kind of, I don't want to say generic, but it's very sparse. You can see it's really, really basic. Name, day of birth, allergies, meds, profession, chief complaint, injury history, what makes it worse, what makes it better, and then the assessment.
Okay.
And so it's super, super basic, but I end up writing like a few pages of stuff because I just let them kind of direct where it goes. And so, because I don't like clutter really on my pages, because it just makes it harder for me to see the notes. So I'll just make it very generic, and then I'll go through all the stuff that I want to, and I'll write what's needed and what's not. I don't have to bother with like, oh, delete this and delete that and whatever. So it makes it's just my system of stuff. Their chief complaint. Right. So the reason why I have that is that is the goal that I want to achieve. Like I want to solve their chief complaint, because they might have like 4 other things on their body that are hurting them and are bugging them, but the reason why they're coming to see me is that their elbow hurts. And so I want to make sure that I address their elbow. I will also ask them like if there's other stuff that hurts, or that's kind of part of the injury history, and I just keep asking, okay, what else hurts, or because injury history will kind of tell me also what else hurts. Because they'll say, oh, I had a dislocated shoulder years ago, but that seems to be okay, or meniscus surgery and sprained ankle, this and that. I'm like, okay, so how are those feeling now? Now, how are those joints feeling now? And they'll tell me, oh, well, it only bugs me every once in a while, so it's no big deal. Or like, oh, there's no issue at all. Or, oh, yeah, it actually sometimes bugs me. And so I'll make a note of those. But the priority issue for me to always get back to, because I'm not sure if you noticed, I'm a little bit ADHD, so I tend to go off track sometimes. So this helps me stay on track and not lose my focus of like what I'm actually trying to help them with. And so like, even though I might get temporarily distracted with the shoulder or the knee or the hip or whatnot, I always make sure I go back to the elbow and see, hey, how's that elbow feeling? How's that elbow feeling?
Yeah. Yeah. Any other kind of like just movement assessments that you might do, you know, like an NKT level 1, David has people do range of motion tests, or he'll have people do, you know, Faber, or he'll have people do, you know, the single leg stance, and he'll do those assessments, use that as a way to kind of guide him into what kind of NKT assessments he's going to do. And then he might come back and recheck those. Are there any certain assessments like that, other than the ones taught, you know, in level 1, that you just always would do with people, or that are kind of standard for you?
I don't really have a standard that everybody does, because I let whatever their issue is kind of dictate how I assess them. I always try to do some type of a visual assessment and some type of a palpatory assessment.
Okay.
So what I mean by visual assessment is like something like a static posture, whether it be standing, sitting, or whatever their position might be. And then I try to get them in as, you know, in various positions, depending on what their, you know, what makes it worse and what makes it better.
Yeah.
And then also a movement type of assessment as well. And that will be dictated again on what makes it worse, what makes it better, what happened when they injured it. So a lot of times I'll be using gait, I'll be using some normal like gym stuff like squats, toe touches, and lunges and things like that. Because I'm a little bit more movement-y. I'll have them do like hip hinge versus toe touch. I'm just gonna see stuff like that. But then like if it's somebody, if it's a little bit more sports related or movement specific related, I'll actually have them perform that movement several times and just in a very slow manner. So I can see a little bit more of what that is like. And if there's something that, like, if I'm not familiar with that sport, I'll actually look it up. But I mean, most of the time I can kind of get the gist of what's going on and see if a lot of it's just kind of joint positioning to see if things are properly aligned and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and then after that, I'll kind of do like a palpatory assessment. I'll do one I could do one standing or, you know, in a static posture, or I could also do them when they're laying down, and I definitely do them when they're laying down.
Okay.
That will tell them like in a rested state, like kind of what will grab my attention a little bit more.
Awesome. Let's see. After you do that, when you're doing your testing, you know, there's kind of the standard cues that David has given us, like meet my pressure. Are there any other cues that you find, you know, oh, well, I say meet my pressure and they just can't meet my pressure. They can't relax. They can't figure it out. Are there any other like guiding cues you might give to people in your testing that help them understand what you're doing, or just help them to get a visual of what they need to do?
Yeah. And it depends on which test though too. So because sometimes the meet my pressure stuff works that I find, and sometimes people don't understand what that means. And so I have like a few different cues for people, just to kind of throw them around and see which one works for them. And I find that like by the time I'm starting to test them, I don't really need to say meet my pressure anymore, because we kind of cleared that in the beginning of like how much pressure they need to use. And what I find is that during the course of the session for the testing portion, they're more confused about which direction to go, or they just need more guidance on which direction to go.
Okay.
So I'll actually give more cues on which way to go. So I'll do the whole, you know, tap here, or I'll like tap on whatever, and then it's like, hold your hand here, hold your arm here, or when it comes to the foot, I mean, I'm not going to tell them, okay, so I need you inverted and plantar flex. I'm not going to do that. I just kind of put their foot wherever I want it to be put. And I say, hold your foot here, don't let me move it.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. Because otherwise they don't know which direction. I mean, you know, like when we were learning all the tests, we were all confused about, you know, which direction to go. And we know the muscles pretty well. So I find that especially with the foot and the like lower extremities, you're like, oh, I don't know which way to go. So just hold your foot here, don't let me move it.
Okay.
Cool. With the glute test, I'm like, okay, cool, step on my hand. And that one actually is kind of funny, because that one has given me like a 99.9% batting average as far as success rate on instruction for muscle testing. The only one time that the step on my hand thing didn't work was at a workshop in Singapore in December where I said, step on my hand. And this guy just went up and did a full single leg bridge.
Oh, no. Oh, man.
So guess what was facilitated on him? Glutes.
Oh, man.
That was the funniest thing. Everybody just cracked up immediately. He's like,
Yeah.
what? I don't get it. Yeah, it was so funny.
Okay.
But yeah, like step on my hand, or just hold your foot here, or just like for a SOAS test, I'd say like, okay, inside ankle bone. I'll tap their median malleolus. So inside ankle bone to the ceiling, and I kind of point. Or like for QL stuff, I'll say, okay, bring your ankles towards that wall over there, and they'll kind of point, or I'll point. Or just I'll give more directions as far as like what they should be doing, that like their pressure. So I find that for me that helps a little bit more for them, because they're confused in like which way to go, and the pressure thing's fine by then.
Okay. Let's see. When you are going to start testing with somebody, are there any prerequisites that you have? Is there anything that's like, okay, you wore jeans today and that really doesn't work for doing your SOAS test? Are there anything that might request people to come in and you need to make sure you do these things before I can do testing, or it'll really make it difficult? Like, don't go out and do your max rep deadlifts before I test your glutes, or things like that. Is there anything that you would try to advise people to do or not do before you do NKT?
Yeah, and I have like a little welcome sheet. It's not really a sheet, it's like a couple pages long, that just kind of explains their services and tells them like what to do to be prepared, directions and all that stuff, and policies and things like that. So on that sheet, I have them, I tell them like how to be dressed. So I tell, I'm not actually, I don't even know if it has no jeans on there, but I don't really find that jeans have really been much of an issue. Unless they're super tight, and I haven't really had anybody with tight jeans. But if somebody does come in, because you always get that one person that just doesn't read anything, and they're like, I don't know what's going on. And I mean, even if their clothes seem like they might be fine to them, but to us, we're like, well, no. Even though you're wearing yoga pants, these yoga pants are 3 sizes too small for you.
Yeah.
And they are basically a very tight belt. So these are causing your back pain.
Yeah.
I'll explain to them like why the clothes matter and how they come into play with their pain sometimes. So, or how it can come into play with their pain. So, but I mean, in that case, typically, if it's going to be something that really impedes muscle testing, I can always find a different way to do stuff. At my gym in Taiwan, I have extra clothes for people to borrow. So I let them, have that as an option. And typically it's like, my old clothes. So they're like, well, I don't think this fits very well, but it does the trick.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, like with the cool thing with like level 3 stuff is that you can indirectly test muscles. And so I'll actually use level 3 type testing to get around those kind of issues.
Okay.
Yeah. So same thing with like, I mean, if somebody is immobile, but you still want to test them, like for example, like a fresh herniated disc, you can test them really without having them participate too much to make them hurt. So I just kind of use that logic in times where I can't test them because of any type of physical restriction.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious, when you're doing, how much of your test do you actually act on? If you find a ton of stuff with somebody, find like 20 relationships, okay. Are you just going to focus on like the top 2 things? You're going to do those, or in your session, might you try to release and activate a whole bunch of different issues, but and only give them homework for a couple of things? What's kind of the like end point for you, where it's like, okay, we've tested this many relationships, these are related to the priority thing, and we're just going to cut off there. That's where we're done with our testing. We're going to move on to some of the homework stuff.
Yeah, I like to do a little bit more investigation versus treatment, because the less treatment that I do, the better. Okay. And also the less testing that I do, the better, I guess. So like, I mean, the more I'm sorry, the less neurological input that you have to give somebody, I think the better.
Okay.
Because if you're giving them, yeah, less is more. Because if you're finding, I mean, because you'll end up getting really good at NKT with practicing. You end up finding like 1 million pairs in 15 minutes, right? And so if you're finding 1 million pairs and you're treating 1 million pairs, the brain is like, there's so much stuff going on because it's all learning new stuff. It's all like inputting new motor control patterns. So the less of that goes on, the better chance they'll have at, first of all, having it stick, but then second of all, the client actually understands like what's going on. Because otherwise, it's too much stuff just getting bombarded at them and they just get confused. So I'll, in the middle of all that testing barrage of stuff, I'll typically only do stuff that's a little bit more hardware related, and then just kind of reset to see if that changes anything. Okay. So for example, like a common one that I'll find is with protracted shoulders or like bicep tendon displacement, that the fascia around like the UCF, and I guess I could swear in this one, right?
It's just going to go on to the,
yeah.
It's nothing that people haven't heard, anybody else say many times. You can, whatever you want to say.
That's true. So up in I'll still keep it a little more kosher. The UCF area, a lot of times there's going to be like a physical fascial restriction in that area that causes things to shut down, or that's physically pulling all the stuff over medially. And so I'll actually just ART that and just clear that first, because that's considered kind of a hardware issue, and then go from there, and then have them move around a little bit, and then just kind of see if that changes the testing. Because if it can change some of the hardware stuff in that sense, that will change the motor control and how it works. But if you're trying to figure out all the motor control with a hardware issue in there, then it's not going to be as accurate. So that's one example of treating something before the actual treatment, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'll use a lot of the testing to kind of show the client more so of like what's going on, and I'll explain to them. So I'll like I'll test a certain muscle. I'll test their glutes, for example. I'll say, okay, cool. Step on my hand, and I'll say, okay, cool. Can you feel how like I can lift up your hand or lift up your foot? And they'll say, yeah. Or like if it was really clear, I'm like, ooh, so my arm's a little stronger than your butt. Sorry. And they're like, ah. So because they can feel like they know when the muscle testing fails. Oh, that brings me real quick to the muscle testing thing. When I preface it to them, I'll actually show them how it feels to fail a muscle test.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll show them how it feels to fail a muscle test. But I'll do it in a way where because I want them to know like what's coming up and what's expected and what's good.
Okay.
So I tell them that it's okay to fail, and that's actually stuff that we're looking for. And so that like I show them like how it feels to fail a muscle test through, and that's more of I guess it's now a level 3 thing, but you can get it on the level 2 videos. And sunshine.
The sun has risen. Yeah.
Sunshine.
Oh,
You get tan on that one.
And the light has like changed in my room throughout.
Special effect lighting.
Yeah. I have people out there shining lights, and that's not really the sun,
Nice.
Yeah, my studio crew.
Sweet. But no, I'll explain to them like that if they feel like it's not a good test for them, like if they just can't feel it be strong and connected and whatnot, to not try harder. So that prevents a lot of people from compensating.
Okay.
So sorry to jump around.
No, that's good to know. Yeah.
But yeah, that just helps them from compensating later on, and it just tells them like it's okay to fail. This is what we're looking for. It just gives us clues to what we're trying to find, because we are trying to find something that's wrong, right? So it's okay for things to fail, and if it does fail, don't try to fight it because they'll just hurt themselves more. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So then they just let go. I'm like, all right, cool. It makes it a lot clearer for muscle testing too. Yeah, so a lot of the testing is I'll do it a lot for them, And that also kind of helps me remember stuff too. Like I'll jot notes down and everything, but it helps me just kind of process things a little bit better when I'm explaining it to them. And that's just kind of how my brain works too. So I'll do the glute test and they'll fail and I'll say, okay, cool. So, and just based on like my palpation and assessments and stuff like that, I'll have already have a pretty good assumption of something that's, related to that glute. So for example, I'll have them test their psoas, and then I'll retest the glute and I'll show them pretty much like how NKT works. I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna have you touch right here on your belly or right here in your leg, and then let's try that glute again. And they're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? I'm like, okay, take your hand off. I'm like, oh my God. And so that whole thing. And I'll explain to them, like, so this is kind of how NKT works. We're figuring out like, so this muscle that we're touching right here is called your psoas muscle. It's a hip flexor. It does this. And so this thing is and so like we can just kind of test, and I'll do the directional testing and say, okay, cool. So it looks like your hip flexor is compensating for your glutes. So your butt's in your stomach. You're like, that's weird. And so this way it brings them into the session a little bit more, and it involves them more. So they can kind of understand like, oh, I'm sitting a lot, that's hip flexion. So I'm sitting too much, and that's causing my hip extensors to not work so well.
Okay.
So it helps them understand a little bit more about what's going on in their body. And of course, some people don't care to know about that. And if they do, then I just don't tell them that. So I ask them, in the beginning, like, are you the kind of person who would rather know what's going on, or do you want me to just kind of like do stuff and explain stuff to you at the end? And so some people really like to be involved in the whole process, and they like to like, ooh, what's going on here? What's going on here? And then some people are just like, nope, just like do stuff, tell me what to do, and then like tell me what to do at the end. I'm like, all right.
Okay.
So I'll just kind of let that dictate too. But if for those people though, I'll just go about like, doing the tests that I want to as clues to the bigger test. And so when people get to level 3, you get to learn a little bit more about hierarchies of dysfunctions. So I'll only treat the ones that are the top priority stuff. Because everything else is, everything else you'll find is, I mean, it'll help temporarily, but there's bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a plug for level 3. Everybody get to level 3.
Yeah.
It's really good stuff up there, obviously.
So there's kind of the, back to like priorities, there's kind of the priorities of what they say, oh, my shoulder really hurts. That is my number one thing. And then within that, there's kind of your NKT priorities as well. That's like, okay, it could be this relationship, or, there's scars, or there's other things that are going on that maybe might be a higher priority. And you kind of look through the checklist of your own priority too.
Yeah. So all the stuff that I treat, I make sure that it's related to their complaint. Because if you treat a priority dysfunction, but it has nothing to do with their pain, they don't care.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we know we did something cool and awesome, but they don't care. You didn't change anything that they wanted to change.
Okay. Right.
So, so it's kind of like if you bring your car into the car wash, you're like, I want a car wash, and they rotate your tires. You're like, well, that's cool, but I wanted my car to be washed, So that's why I have, again, I have that teeth complaint up there. So I always want to make sure that whatever I'm treating, whatever I'm doing is tied into their teeth complaint.
Okay. Right.